So, did you have any idea what you were taking on when you decided to do this?
Well, you never do you, really? It just seems like a good idea, and you just trust that you're going to be able to work out all the problems, or that Simon Vincenzi is going to work out all the problems, as it usually is lately. So, no, you never know what you're doing. You just hope, as long as it fills you with a passion that you want to solve it, then that's when you do it.
Yeah. And talk about why you chose Elvis Legs and why to bring it back at this point.
Elvis Legs, I think, is an interesting dance because it survived outside the show that it was originally in. It was in Fanchos Go Las Vegas in 1995. And it's really good in cabaret. It's really good in lots of different situations. And just before the lockdown happened, Nicholas Pinnock, who danced it originally, had been emailing me saying that he fancied dancing again. And then Hugh Morgan and Paul Adlam said, "Why don't you do a project? You should do something." And I was thinking, what could we do? But because I've been talking to Nicholas about Elvis Legs, it seemed, because of the choreography of it and the possibility that it might fit into a grid on a screen, it seemed like a good idea at the time. That was before I realised that in unison dancing live, dancers really rely a lot on the energy of the people around them. And to be really tight in unison on your own at home with sort of me and a couple of others with little screens, it's a totally different thing. So I didn't really realise, but that's why I thought of doing Elvis Legs.
Yeah. And I don't know, do any of the dancers want to speak about the experience of dancing that without anybody else in the room? What was that like?
Frauke, what was it like? Or Maho?
Frauke?
Anna? Got anything to say? They're just pleased it's over, I think.
Yeah.
Well, that was just great to see, and it's so nice to see so many familiar faces. I'm just so thrilled. I just want to, touch my screen, pet all of you. But I was just very glad that I lived close to Maho because she knows very well, and we could meet in the park for socially distant rehearsal.
True, that we had a few rehearsals in Hillyfields and Brockwell Park, and that was really useful, and I think it made a huge difference to have real people to rehearse with, even if it wasn't very close.
Yeah. And you got set and you got costumed to everybody. Talk about how you did that and how lockdown kind of impacted on it all.
Well, Simon's concept was to send out those curtains, the slash curtains, and a light and a tripod to hold the curtain and a costume out to every dancer. And at the beginning of it was earlier in the lockdown, postage was and deliveries were a bit not so trustworthy. So we ended up having to drive all the stuff to different places, except for Anna in Barcelona, who had to, in fact, I think there's a little film that Simon's made about it, where she had to work out how to put it up without the tripod. So everyone had to assemble their own, we had to get it to them, they had to assemble their own set. It was all laid out at Simon's home, so Ruth, his mother, had to host our costume and set workshop until it went out. So then everyone assembled it, everyone had to learn the sequences on their own. If they couldn't get to Hillyfields, then they had to learn at home. And then we just filmed it all on Zoom, which has its own special stuff.
Yeah, so we've got a question from Ruth Hecht, which says, were the dancers filmed at the same time or at different times, then edited together?
The dancers were filmed separately, one by one, because if you had too many people on Zoom and you were recording, it went even more glitchy, and you lost, lots more information. So we had to do one at a time. And Simon had a photograph of the setup so that we could compare it to each filming session. So yeah, we did it one at a time, and we learned it got better because we learned more things, more tricks.
And Ruth's got a couple of follow-ups, actually. She says, why do some people wear face masks and others not? And can you talk about the shadows and were they deliberate?
Everybody starts off without their coronavirus masks, and then they will become infected. So all of them wear masks by the end. Yeah, it spread. Yeah. And so what's the other?
The shadows, which were beautiful. I love those shadows. Yeah.
Yes, that was part of the set. That was part of the design. It was very hard to get the shadows. It was hard to control the lighting. Sometimes we filmed at night when people didn't have curtains, so that we could try and encourage more shadows. But when it came to the actual filming, we had to work with whatever was there. I don't know if Simon's got any comments on the shadows.
Simon.
Can you unmute Simon? Can anyone unmute Simon?
The idea of the shadow was to just try and, because I wanted us to be aware that people were in their houses. This sort of strange cabaret was happening in their houses during lockdown. So it's the idea of sort of footlights. It's a simple way. And unfortunately, I bought very, very cheap lights. They just broke the whole time. So one of the dramas that continued was this sort of the lights constantly just bursting in the middle of filming. But we found ways around it.
Yes. Yes. Anna had to use a different kind of lamp entirely because hers broke before we even started filming it. I think we just set it up and then it went crash. It exploded, so that was it. So yeah. And
weren't you saying that it actually affected some of the dancers couldn't take part because they couldn't get the costume and sets?
Yes. One of the first dancers to be involved was Annika Spampinato, who's in the USA. And then there's just no way we could get the set there. And there's no way we could guarantee that anything would arrive there. So Annika and Ella Mesmer, who turned out to be in Portugal, so she couldn't either. So our two standby dancers came in and filled their places immediately. So that was really lucky.
And something that I think was, it started with joy because the crowdfunder was so incredibly successful. Was that something that you've done before? All of those names on the film who supported it, I mean, that's fantastic, isn't it?
It is amazing. I can't believe that people did that. It was just heart-rendingly generous and wonderful. Yes, I had done a Kickstarter before for a hand in glove project at the V&A Museum when I expected ACE funding didn't come through. So I did that then, but I wasn't sure if people would be able to do it. Everyone was losing their jobs. It was an awful time. It was the best time to do a project where you paid artists. They really needed it, but it was also really scary. But what really struck me was that although there were some incredibly generous people who had jobs who gave money, there was an awful lot of tiny, tiny contributions by an awful lot of people, and people that I knew didn't have a job and who had lost their work. So it was very moving, very wonderful.
Yeah. We've got a couple more questions here. So there are comments on chat about how well it worked on Zoom, but there's also a comment saying, was there anything that you couldn't do on Zoom that you felt was lost because of Zoom?
It's really hard because maybe, but I've been so focused on what is working on the Zoom that I haven't really thought about that. I mean, of course, it's much harder. You had to sort of had to learn from scratch almost how to put something together and how to deal with the glitches and to find out that things I thought were going to happen. I thought that they might change places on the screen, but actually that didn't work. But that wasn't necessarily a Zoom thing. That was just my concept. As ever, when you imagine something, the reality of it often is different in some way, and you have to just go with that. And the Zoomness is part of that journey, I guess.
And I guess it should be said that although the film is only about 5 minutes long, the amount of work that has gone into creating it, I know, has been incredibly detailed, late nights, lots and lots of thought and head scratching. One of the questions here is, have you learned anything that might be useful for other choreographers to know?
Yes, I probably have, actually, but it's something I think that it's probably, if somebody was to explain how they were planning to do something, I might have some hints of what not to do or whatever. But it's yeah, it was a very detailed piece of work, and yeah, hard to say general things. Just know your Zoom. You have to know your Zoom.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, this is new to us as well, and there's been a lot of work to try to get the tickets working and the film working through Zoom. And there've been elements that, you know, Zoom we haven't done and nobody else has done on Zoom before. So there's been a lot of learning from our point of view as a distributor of work as well. So we'd be happy to share that with anybody else who's going to host something like this. Somebody here is coming back to the fundraising, Lee, and said, is there any advice that you can give other people about raising money like this?
I guess you have to sort of be slightly crazy, I think, to do it and just jump in there, because it's really stressful and it feels so bad to ask for, you know, if you're not the sort, you know, you don't normally do that. It's very hard to do it, but it's also fantastically supportive when people do it. But what would I say? I don't know. I'd be really happy to talk to anyone who's thinking of doing it and have a chat about it in case I can help. But yeah, hard to make general comments.
Brilliant. And I'm going to do one last question actually before we start to sign off, which is from Jane Dimble. And can you explain, Lee, why Elvis is so important to you? Well,
thank you, Jane. That's a good question. No, he's not so important to me, but I was, at that time in 1995, I was quite obsessed with doing things like making a dictionary of somebody's moves. And so the Fanshaws and myself at that time, wanted to make a dictionary of every single move of Elvis in his films, but only done once, and to be collected out of order, out of context. So they were kind of glued together. So we had a couple of guys that were just copying the leg movements, and another couple who were copying the arm movements. And then we superimposed them all together on top of each other, so that it was the wrong arms with the wrong legs. And then the dancers had to make it feel comfortable. And then I cut it up into chunks and rearranged it in various ways so that it could be seen. So it was a very formal arrangement of this list. It was like a list of Elvis legs. And it took a long time for it to get kind of into the bodies and to try and make it look like it was real dancing and not just some horrible thing that somebody had cut up and made you do. Yeah, it wasn't very relaxing. And then the reason why I stuck with it was because we did it in the Vauxhall Tavern for Ducky. And it's a really great audience that are usually very drunk and very close to the dancers, and they just screamed the whole way through. And I thought, this is interesting because I think they used to do that to Elvis. So I wonder if it's sort of a magical thing, and if you do these moves, people scream. So I kept on getting it out and trying it in other places, and they did keep screaming, but they were also drunk. So I don't know what we learned from that. But so that's why I like Elvis, because it makes people scream when they're drunk.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to draw the questions to an end there and just say thank you so much to Lee and the dancers. And Lee, would you like to say thank you to anybody else?
Yes, I would like to say thank you very much to Simon Vincenzi for designing and for all his support and huge contributions to this. And I would also like to thank Steve Blake for the sound and for being so persevering through it all. Grace Porter for editing it and just keep working on it, and not least all the dancers who, that was an amazing thing that you committed to, and you did so well, and thank you for dancing and for being so hard, and you did it anyway. And I've got to thank you supporters again, because without you none of us would have been doing any of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lee. And thank you to the PDSW team who have really worked really hard from the back end to try to make this work. So Caroline, in particular, to Jeanette, to George. Thank you very much indeed, and everybody else who's been involved.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline.
We're really thrilled that we're going to be sharing this out through July. Caroline has put the links on there if you'd like to come back in and watch it again. And through working with Lee, we're actually doing 2 ways of seeing it. So you can book on and see it for free with the Q&A. But at the weekends, between now and the end of July, you can come in and pay for it. So we're doing all of our first ever pay-per-view session, and you get the behind-the-scenes film, the Q&A and the film. So this is all a learning journey for Lee and for PDSW. Do tell your friends and contacts about it. And I hope that Lee's film is seen far and wide. Thank you, Lee, for giving us a chance to work together. And thank you to all the dancers and the folk who've been involved with making this happen. And it's our first experience of a virtual audience in a proper performance sense. So lovely to see you all. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lee.